The first sound was the scrape of my keys against the defense table. Metal on varnished wood. Too loud in the quiet. 7 cottage keys, split on a worn brass ring, slid and clinked until one, the old blue-tagged one Grandma had labeled Pelican 4, stopped against my palm. I curled my fingers around it before it could rattle again. Above us, the ceiling fan ticked like a lazy metronome. The air in the Monroe County Probate courtroom smelled like lemon cleaner, dry paper, and faint ocean salt that had snuck in through old windows. "Next matter," the clerk droned. "Estate of Rosalind Ann Ward, deceased. Petitioners, Mark and Linda Ward. Respondents, Emma Ward and Kyle Ward." My name echoed off the wood. I adjusted my khaki skirt, felt the stiff line of my navy collar against the back of my neck, and kept my eyes on the polished edge of the bench. My uniform felt too sharp for this faded room. Like I'd brought a ship's bridge into a Key West museum. "All parties present?" Judge Hollander asked. My parents' attorney rose, smooth as a sales pitch. "Mark and Linda Ward for the petitioners, Your Honor," he said. Andrea, my lawyer, stood beside me. "Andrea Wallace for Lieutenant Emma Ward, U.S. Navy," she said. "Respondent." "Just Emma is fine," I muttered, too low for the mic. The judge squinted over his glasses. "Miss Ward," he said, "you grew up on Bay Pelican Lane?" "It's Lieutenant, Your Honor," I said before I could stop myself. "But yes. Those cottages were my grandmother's life." A few people in the benches shifted. I didn't have to turn to know who they were. I could feel them. Tenants. Churchwomen. Frank, the retired coastie from Pelican 2. They'd come in their Sunday best, the smell of cheap cologne and starch mixing with courthouse dust. My father didn't look at them. Or me. He sat at the other table in his pressed linen shirt, tan smooth, hair a little thinner, confidence radiating like heat off asphalt. Mom sat at his side, pearl earrings on, hands folded over a structured purse that probably cost more than a month's rent on Pelican 5. Judge Hollander flipped through the top sheet of the file. "Says here we're dealing with 7 properties," he said. "All on Bay Pelican Lane. Petitioners claim there is no will. That about right, Mr. Ward?" Dad nodded, leaning forward slightly, as if he'd been waiting all morning for that cue. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. "Mom never got around to it. We checked her house, her files, the bank. Nothing. My wife and I stepped in so her cottages wouldn't fall apart." His voice was smooth, earnest. If I hadn't spent my childhood watching him talk mechanics into discounts, I might have believed it. "And your daughter?" the judge asked. "Where does she fit, in your view?" Dad's mouth twisted. "Emma's Navy," he said. "Always gone, deployed. She's doing her thing out there. We don't want to drag her into local responsibilities she can't handle long term. This whole..." He waved a hand vaguely toward our table. "Objection is unnecessary." Playing soldier. Too busy. Doesn't deserve a cent. He didn't say the words out loud. He didn't have to. They hung between us like humidity. The judge looked at me again. "You disagree, Lieutenant?" he asked. My throat felt dry, like I'd swallowed chalk. "Yes, sir," I said. "I don't believe my grandmother left her life's work floating. And I don't believe there was no will." Dad let out a soft laugh, practiced and patronizing. "Judge, with respect," he said. "Emma spent the last decade on ships. She wasn't here. She didn't see what we dealt with. She's emotional. That's all this is." The keys bit into my palm. Andrea nudged my arm, a silent hold. Judge Hollander tilted his head. "Lieutenant Ward," he said, "do you have any documentation supporting your belief that a will existed?" The question cracked the air like a starter's pistol. I took a breath. The lemon cleaner smell sharpened. The ceiling fan ticked. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. I picked up the thick manila envelope sitting beside my binder. It felt heavier than it should, edges softened by weeks of my fingerprints. On the tab, in Andrea's neat handwriting, Estate of Rosalind Ward, Evidentiary Packet, submitted by Lieutenant Emma Ward, USN. I crossed the worn tile floor, heels clicking in the quiet, and placed it on the edge of the bench. "For the court," I said. Hollander raised both eyebrows. "You compiled this yourself?" he asked. "With my attorney's help," I said. "I'm a logistics officer. I inventory things for a living." A tiny ripple of laughter rose from the tenant row, quickly stifled. The judge's mouth twitched. He slid a letter opener under the seal, tore it clean, and began to read. Paper rustled. The clock on the wall ticked. Somewhere in the back, someone suppressed a cough. I didn't look at my parents. I watched his eyes. He scanned the first section, color copies of property ledgers, highlighted in yellow where a grandma had scribbled notes. "Keep rent same for Frank, single mom. Don't raise this year." His brows furrowed, then smoothed. He flipped to the next tab. Draft wills. My name typed, then underlined in Rosalind's familiar looped hand. Attorney letterhead with corrected addresses. A notarized letter of intent. His pen tapped twice. "Where did these come from?" he asked, not looking up. "From my grandmother's safe deposit box," I said. "She left directions with the tenant. The bank verified her signature and access. The drafts name me as manager of the cottages." Andrea gestured slightly. "And the intent letter, Your Honor," she added, "states clearly that any formal will she signed would reflect that wish." Dad shifted, annoyance flaring. "Drafts don't matter," he said. "Anybody can scribble ideas. She never filed anything." The judge ignored him, turning to the next divider. An affidavit from Pastor Jim. The copy of Grandma's envelope from the church. Emma, just in case, written on the front. Another notarized statement inside, echoing what she'd told me every summer. The cottages were for people, not profit. His gaze got sharper. Then he hit the page we'd flagged with a blue tab. The photocopy of a handwritten logbook line, faint but legible. April 7th. Ward, Rosalind. Last will and testament. Witnesses, Evelyn K., Tomei R. Notary, Samuel Rohr. Judge Hollander stopped, read the line once, read it again. The fan ticked overhead. The room leaned forward with him. He let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like a short laugh, sat back in his chair, and took off his glasses. "Well," he said slowly, eyes now fixed on my parents' table. "This is interesting." The word rolled out, soft but loaded. My father went still. Mom's fingers tightened on her purse strap until her knuckles whitened. Kyle finally looked up from his phone, sunglasses pushed onto his head, confusion cutting through his practiced disinterest. What is that?" Mom asked, voice too high. The judge held the page up between two fingers. "This, Mrs. Ward," he said, "is a notary log entry, dated April 7th. It records that your mother, Rosalind Ward, sat in front of a notary named Samuel Rohr with two witnesses and signed a document labeled Last Will and Testament." He let that sink in. "Yet your petition," he continued, tapping their file with the edge of the log copy, "states that no will exists." Silence pressed against my ears. Dad's jaw worked. "People misremember," he said. "Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe—" "Mr. Rohr is present in the courtroom today," Andrea said quietly. All eyes turned. Sam rose from the second row, back straight despite his years, hands gripping the pew in front of him. In that moment, he looked like every senior chief I'd ever seen stand at quarters, retired from the deck, but not from duty. "Your Honor," he said, voice gravelly, "that's my book." Judge Hollander nodded once, like the last piece had clicked. He set the log copy down on my packet, fingers lingering there. "Mr. and Mrs. Ward," he said, tone cooling. "I was prepared to treat this as a simple intestate matter. Children inherit, properties are divided, everyone complains and goes home." He tapped the paper again. "Now we have a sworn notary record of a will that went missing while you two rushed to claim 7 valuable properties." His gaze hardened. "Interesting indeed." Heat crawled up my neck. For the first time since I'd walked into the courthouse, I let myself exhale. This wasn't over. Not even close. But the ground had shifted. They'd come in certain I'd be the one who looked unreasonable, angry Navy daughters stirring up trouble for no reason. They'd forgotten I'd been counting crates and signatures since before I could legally drink. They'd brought a story. I'd brought receipts. The judge shuffled the packet closed, palm resting on it like a paperweight. "We're not making final decisions today," he said. "But I can tell you this. No one is selling anything until I understand exactly what happened to this will." He looked back at me. "Lieutenant Ward," he said, voice steady, "for the moment, consider those cottages under your watch." The keys dug into my hand so hard they hurt. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My parents just stared. They hadn't even seen the half of it yet. Because that logbook line, that one interesting entry, was only the last knot in a rope I'd been following for weeks, through bank vaults, church offices, and the kind of secrets that only come out on porches after sunset. And it had all started the day I got home from deployment, stood on Grandma's empty dock in my dress whites, and asked a simple question. "Where's the will?" The way my parents answered told me everything I needed to know, and nothing I could prove. Not yet. The first thing I remembered was the sound of the screen door, that high, complaining squeak, then the slap as it hit the frame, Pelican 4's heartbeat. Even in the courtroom, when the judge said Bay Pelican Lane, I could hear it. Smell the salt and sunscreen baked into that porch wood. As a kid, I'd sit cross-legged on the planks, sweat trickling down my back, paint flecks drying on my fingers. The air tasted like brine and cheap ice pops. Grandma's radio crackled somewhere inside, half tuned to an oldies station, half static. "Edges first," she'd call from the ladder, her voice cut by the breeze. "Don't slap paint in the middle and call it done. Edges tell the truth." I dragged the brush carefully along the trim of Pelican 3's window, seafoam green dripping slow, the bristles scratching over old chips. Pelican 1 smelled like sunscreen and charcoal. Pelican 2 always like Frank's coffee. Pelican 5 had that busted spring in the screen door, bam, announcing every teenager sneaking out after quiet hours. My parents? They floated in like tourists and out again. Dad would stand at the end of the little crushed shell drive, hands on hips, eyes measuring. "She could sell this whole row for real money," he'd mutter. "Tear 'em down, build condos. This?" He flicked a paint chip off the railing. "This is sentiment, not investment." Mom would fan herself with a brochure, perfume too sweet in the thick air. "Roz is stubborn," she'd say. "She likes her little charity houses. Let her have them. Our future is not peeling pastel." They never picked up a brush. They didn't see the way Grandma tracked every rent check in a ledger so worn the cardboard bowed. her neat handwriting marching across the page. Names, amounts, little notes. Reduced this month. New baby. Veteran. Keep stable. At night, when the porches finally went quiet and the cottage lights made a crooked necklace along the lane, I'd sit on the dock with her. The boards were still warm from the day. The bay lapped at the pylons, soft slaps of water, the air smelling like salt and old rope. Porch lights glowed behind us, halos over each cottage door. I'd swing my bare feet over the edge, heels knocking the weathered posts, while she sipped coffee from that chipped pelican mug, the crack in the glaze catching the light. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, she'd count softly, nodding at each cottage. 7 chances to do right, every month. Why don't you sell them? I'd ask, watching a crab scuttle under the dock. Her eyes crinkled. Because then they'd stop being cabins and start being products, she said. I'm not in the product business. I'm in the people business. She'd bump her shoulder into mine. You help me keep them standing, they'll take care of you one day, she said. Not like a lottery ticket, like a backbone. I didn't fully understand. I just knew I liked the feeling of the keys in my hand when she let me lock up. The ring was heavy for my 12-year-old fingers, brass teeth clinking, tags painted in her careful colors. Pelican 1 to 7, each one chipped at the edges from years of use. Hold them tight, she said. You're going to need the weight. At home, the weight was different. Our little tract house on the mainland smelled like microwaved dinners and paper bills. The air felt heavier, somehow, even with the AC blasting. Dad's voice filled the kitchen one night when I was 17, sharper than any seagull cry. Navy? He scoffed, crumpling the glossy brochure I'd brought home. That's for boys with nothing else. Your college material, or business, office, not ships. Mom frowned at the brochure like it was a bad report card. It's dangerous, she said, and dirty, and you'll be gone all the time. We'll never see you. As if they saw me now. I stared at the Form DD something in my hands, enlistment steps circled in red. Grandma thinks it's a good fit, I said. Logistics, planning, keeping things moving, it's what I'm good at. Roz filled your head with nonsense, Dad snapped. She made you her little assistant. You think that translates to the real world? Making sure people have a place to sleep and the pipes don't burst feels real, I said. He jabbed a finger at me. Playing motel manager is not a career, he said. Neither is playing soldier. The word lodged under my skin. That night, I went down to the dock instead of my room. The porch light over Pelican 4 painted a soft halo on the boards. The water was black, only broken by the shimmer of moon and stray boat lights. Grandma was already there, silhouette against the bay. Heard raised voices, she said. Either a storm's coming or Mark's talking again. I sank down beside her, the wood warm through my jeans. They don't want me to go, I said. Navy. They think it's a phase. She took a slow sip from her mug. They thought your mother's desire to leave Indiana was a phase, she said. She just buried it so deep she forgot where she put it. I stared at my hands. What if they're right? I asked. What if I'm dragging all this weight with me and it doesn't mean anything out there? She snorted softly. Ships don't float on feelings, she said. They float on balance sheets and fuel and people who know where every bolt is on a ledger. You've been counting since you were tall enough to see over my desk. She reached into her pocket. For the first time, she slid the keyring fully off her belt and pressed it into my palm. The metal was warm. The tags clinked, little painted ovals catching docklight.
"These are still mine on paper," she said. "But in here," she tapped her chest, "they've been yours for a long time. You carry them now, even if they sit in a locker while you're off doing Navy things." My fingers closed automatically. "What if they never accept it?" I whispered. She shrugged, the old boards creaking with the motion. "They don't have to," she said. "The good thing about truth is it doesn't need a committee." The night I left for boot camp, Mom hugged me hard at the airport and told me to call.
Dad mumbled something about "don't wash out" and stared past my shoulder. Grandma came to the gate, which she hated. "Too many lines," she grumbled. "Lines are for people who haven't learned how to plan." She straightened my collar, fingers smelling like paint and coffee. "You go learn how the big ships work," she said. "Then come home and keep these little ones from sinking." I tapped the keys hidden in my carry-on. "Aye, aye," I said. Years blurred after that. Steel decks under my boots, the constant hum of engines under my bunk. Air that tasted like metal and burnt coffee and salt, no matter the ocean. I tracked pallets and fuel and food like my life depended on it, because it did. Because someone had to know where everything was when things went sideways. I built spreadsheets and checklists and backup plans, the way Grandma had built binders and ledgers and envelopes marked just in case. When the deployment accident happened, compartment flooding, alarms screaming, bodies crashing through narrow spaces, I watched chaos try to swallow order. We didn't let it. We followed lists. We followed training. We followed the stubborn part of ourselves that refused to leave a space unaccounted for. Afterward, when the captain handed me a commendation and said, "Good logistics saved lives," my first thought wasn't of the ship. It was of Pelican 2's porch and Grandma's voice. "Edges first, Emma. Details tell the truth." Every time I came home on leave, the cottages felt both smaller and more solid. Porches more weathered, paint more cracked. Grandma more tired around the eyes, but sharper than ever in her notes. My parents remained satellites. They'd show up on holidays, make noises about downsizing those boxes, and leave with Tupperware. "You going to be gone again?" Mom would ask, like my deployment schedule was an insult. "It's my job," I'd say. Dad would snort. "Must be nice, getting paid to travel," he'd mutter. "Some of us have to worry about real bills." Grandma would roll her eyes once they left. "You keep your receipts," she'd tell me quietly. "One day you'll need them more than you think." I thought she meant tax returns. Until the call came from Mom, voice too flat. "She's gone, Emma," she said. Heart in her sleep. The world narrowed to the tacky feel of the ship's phone against my ear and the dry taste in my mouth. "I'll request leave," I said. "We'll read the will when I get there." Silence. "There is no will," Mom said. Something in her tone, that careful emptiness, made the hairs on my arms lift. "She kept saying she'd do it." Dad's voice cut in from the background. "Never did. We'll handle everything. You just focus on your Navy stuff." The word handle snagged. So did no will. Standing in the tiny metal passageway, engine hum under my boots, I felt the weight of the keys in my pocket, even though they were thousands of miles away in a locker. My grandmother, who had a labeled container for rubber bands, forgot to formalize the one thing she'd talked about for a decade? No. The smoke didn't show yet, but I could smell something burning. I hung up the phone, stared at the bulkhead, and felt a familiar stubbornness settle in my spine. If there was no will, fine. I'd just have to find whatever she'd left in its place.
And when I finally walked into that courthouse weeks later with my khakis pressed and my keys rattling, I knew one thing down to the bone. They might own the story in their heads, but I owned the paper trail. I just didn't know yet how explosive that trail really was. The bank smelled like air conditioning, printer toner, and the faint citrus cleaning spray they used to pretend fluorescent lights felt like sunshine. I stood at the counter in my off-duty jeans and a faded Pelican Cottages t-shirt, deployment tan still sharp against the pale keys crowd. The teller, a woman with a starfish pin on her lapel, inspected my ID,
then the small key taped to Grandma's letter. "Safe deposit box number 147, she said. "You're listed as authorized access, Miss Ward." "Lieutenant," I corrected automatically, then softened. "Emma is fine." She smiled, led me down the narrow hallway lined with steel doors. The air got colder, the hum of the AC louder. When she slid box 147 out of its slot and set it on the little table in the viewing room, my palms went damp. "Take your time," she said, leaving me with the metal box and my heartbeat. The lid stuck for a second, then gave with a tiny squeal. Inside, instead of bonds or jewelry, was order. 3 thick binders, edges worn, labels written in Grandma's neat blue script. Pelican 1 through 3, Pelican 4 through 5, Pelican 6 through 7. Beneath them, a thinner manila folder. Will, drafts, and notes. The breath left my chest in a slow hiss. I pulled the binders out first, the plastic covers cool against my fingers. Each one opened to plastic sleeves filled with copies, deeds, tax payments, handwritten notes, typed letters. Tabs stuck out at specific sections: repairs, tenants, insurance, storms. In the Pelican 2 binder, a post-it fluttered loose. Frank's knee surgery. Keep rent steady this year. My throat tightened. This was her mind on paper. I set the binders aside and opened the manila folder. On top was a typed document on a local attorney's letterhead, the logo slightly outdated, address crossed out and corrected in Rosalind's hand. Last Will and Testament of Rosalind Ann Ward. My name popped up halfway down the page. I hereby nominate my granddaughter, Lieutenant Emma Ward, USN, as steward and manager of my properties located on Bay Pelican Lane. Not owner, steward. Margin notes circled that word. Emma knows the people. Keep rents fair. No selling unless absolutely necessary. The signature line at the bottom was blank. The second document in the folder was another draft, slightly newer, with a few clauses reshuffled. Same intent. My name again linked to management and long-term care of tenants. Also unsigned. At the back, clipped with a rusty paper clip, was a single page titled Letter of Intent. My grandmother's handwriting filled the space below. To anyone reading this who cares about the law more than the truth, it began. My wish is simple. My Pelican cottages are to remain affordable for the people who need them. Emma understands this. She will put service above profit. Any formal will I sign is meant to reflect that. If papers get lost, treat this as my compass. At the bottom, a notary stamp and signature. Samuel Rohr, Notary Public. The date was nearly 6 months before she died. The air in the tiny room smelled suddenly sharper, like toner and something metallic. I sank into the plastic chair, the weight of the folder heavier than any crate I'd hauled on deployment. They were wrong. There wasn't no will. There was preparation, half finished. There was intent, notarized. There were drafts that pointed like arrows at what she meant to do. But no signed, final will, not in this box. So where had it gone? On my way out, the teller gave me a sympathetic smile. "Find what you were looking for?" she asked. "Part of it," I said. Outside, the Florida heat hit me like a physical shove. The bank's glass doors closed with a soft thunk behind me, cutting off the cold hum. Mom was leaning against their SUV in the lot, sunglasses on, arms folded. The smell of her perfume reached me before her words, sharp floral over asphalt and exhaust. "You went to the bank," she said. "Grandma told me to," I replied, holding the binders tight against my chest. Her mouth tightened. "She told you a lot of things she didn't tell us," she said. "Doesn't mean they matter now." I held up the top binder, the label catching the sun. "She left these with my name on the key," I said. "I think they matter more than your word that there's nothing." Mom's gaze flicked to the folder in my hand. "Are those wills?" she asked. "Because if you think waving some scribbles is going to overturn the law—" "Drafts," I said, "and a notarized letter of intent." Her shoulders dropped a fraction. "Intent isn't a will," she said quickly, relief and irritation mixing in her tone. "Law is law. Without a signed document, your father and I have more motive than anyone to pretend nothing else exists," I cut in. Her jaw clenched. "We're not criminals, Emma," she snapped. "We're her children. We're cleaning up a mess she left." I thought of the binder's precise tabs, the ledgers with every rent penny accounted for. "Grandma didn't leave messes," I said. "People just didn't like the way she organized them." I walked past her to my car, feeling her stare on my back like heat. That night, the dining table at Rosalind's house vanished under paper. The cottage smelled like old wood and lemon oil. The fan stuttered overhead, rearranging stacks of photocopies and notes. I laid everything out in rows: deeds, ledgers, draft wills, letter of intent. Grandma's note to me: if they tell you there's nothing, go to the bank first, then the church, and don't let them rush you. You know how to count better than they do. "The church," I murmured. I went the next morning. The sanctuary felt smaller without her in her favorite pew. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, dust drifting in the beams. The air smelled like candle wax and old hymnals. Pastor Jim met me in his office, the door clicking softly shut behind us. He was younger than Grandma, but older than my parents, sleeves rolled up, tie a little crooked. He'd done the graveside service with a voice that almost cracked when he talked about a woman who lived like her porch light was always on. "I figured you'd come," he said, opening a desk drawer. "Roz thought ahead." He pulled out a large, thick envelope. My name was on the front in her looping script. "Emma, just in case they get greedy." My fingers shook as I took it. Inside was another will draft. Later date, more polished language. My role spelled out in crisp legal phrasing. Emma Ward, to serve as trustee and manager of the Pelican Cottages, with authority to maintain, lease, and protect said properties in accordance with decedent's long-held practice of affordable housing. At the back, a short note in Grandma's hand. "Jim, if they pretend this doesn't exist, back Emma. God knows the truth. The logbook will too. R." "The logbook?" I asked. Pastor Jim nodded. "She told me she went to a retired notary she trusted in town," he said. "Said if anyone questions my right mind, they can talk to Sam." "Samuel Rohr?" I asked, thinking of the notary stamp on the intent letter. "That's him," Pastor said. "House on Hibiscus Lane. Always has coffee on." By the time I got to Sam's place, the sun was high and vicious. His little stucco house sat under a drooping palm. Wind chimes clinked lazily on the porch. The air smelled like old coffee and salt. He answered in socks and suspenders, eyes sharp behind thick glasses. "Ms. Ward," he said when I introduced myself. "You've got her jawline." "And her stubbornness," I said. He chuckled. "Good. Come in." His living room was lined with bookshelves and metal boxes. A small safe hummed quietly in the corner. When I asked about Rosalind's will, he didn't look surprised. "She told me this might happen," he said, knees cracking as he knelt by the safe. "Not her first rodeo with family who like shortcuts." He spun the dial, metal clicking. The door swung open with a soft hiss. Inside, among files and old stamps, he pulled out a black, worn notebook. "My logbook," he said. "Every document I've notarized for decades." He flipped through the pages, paper whispering under his fingers. "Here," he said finally, tapping a line. "April 7th, Ward, Rosalind. Last will and testament. Witnesses, Evelyn K., Tomei R." My signature. Seeing it in his ink, not just a photocopy, made something solid settle in my chest. "She signed it," I said. "In my kitchen," he said. "Two neighbors watching. Talked about those cottages like they were her 8th and 9th kids. Made it clear you were the one with the spine to keep them from being gutted." "Do you have a copy?" I asked, even though I knew the answer from Andrea's research later. He shook his head, expression regretful. "Original stayed with her attorney," he said. "I only log and stamp. But this book," he tapped it, "is my Bible. If it's in here, it happened." He let me photograph the page from 3 angles. He signed an affidavit right there at his coffee table, pen scratching on thick paper. By the time I walked out, the sun had dipped a little lower, the air thicker. I had drafts. I had intent. I had a pastor's note. Now I had a logbook line that turned whispers into proof. The picture was still missing the will itself, but the outline was clear. She'd signed. Someone had intercepted. Someone with more to gain from no will than from honoring her stubborn, old-fashioned sense of justice. As I drove back toward the cottages, coconut-scented air freshener doing nothing against the smell of my own stress, I saw Dad's truck parked outside Pelican 3. A second car beside it. Brand new SUV, real estate logo on the side. I pulled over so fast, gravel spit. The agent's voice drifted out as I climbed the porch steps, the wood boards warm under my sandals. "With a little cosmetic work, you could list all 7 as a package," she was saying. "Investors love that. 7 doors, 1 price. Rents are below market. Tons of upside." Dad stood with his arms crossed, squinting at the roof. "Can we bump rent before we list?" he asked. "Feel out what the market will bear?" "Dad," I said. They both turned. The agent plastered on a smile immediately. "Hi there," she chirped. "Family? These properties are incredible. So much potential." "They're not on the market," I said. Her smile tightened. "We were just discussing options," Dad said sharply, "as owners." I stepped closer. The porch smelled like old wood and someone's lunch. "You filed a petition claiming no will," I said. "You didn't get a deed fairy." His jaw clenched. "This isn't Navy business," he said. "This is real life, bills, debt collectors. You wouldn't understand. You're off playing supply officer on a funded ship, while we keep everything here afloat." The words hit the same old bruise. "Playing soldier," I repeated quietly. He flushed. "If you cared so much, maybe you should have been here instead of on boats," he snapped. I thought of steel decks and midnight watches, of the way my sailors' faces looked when I told them we had enough stock to make it through a storm, of letters to families that started with, "We regret to inform you." I thought of Grandma's handwriting in the binder. "Emma knows the people. Keep rents fair." "Doing my job doesn't mean I don't have standing here," I said. "It means I know how to follow a trail. And I found enough to make a judge very interested." He snorted. "You really think some half-baked drafts and a dusty church letter are going to beat legal next of kin?" he said. "Grow up." I met his eyes. I have a notary logbook that says Grandma signed a will, I said. Witnesses ready to swear. A pastor with a sealed envelope. Tenants who'll tell the court exactly what she promised them. I let the words hang. And I have time, I added, because this is my leave. And I'm spending every second making sure you don't turn 7 homes into 7 gold rushes. The agent shifted, uncomfortable. I'll let you two talk, she said, edging past me. Mr. Ward, call me when you're ready to move forward. Or when things are clearer. When she was gone, Dad sagged a little, as if the performance had drained out of him. Why are you doing this? He asked. We're your parents. Because she asked me to, I said. And because I'm tired of you treating her life's work like a scratch-off ticket. The porch light above us flickered. Even in daylight, a strange little blink. I glanced up. Grandma always said the house knew when people were lying. On my way back to my car, I texted Andrea. Notary confirmed. Log entry photo and affidavit done. Real estate agent spotted at Pelican 3. They're moving to sell. Her reply came fast. Then we move faster. Bring everything tomorrow. It's time to build the packet. That night, I sat at Grandma's table, the overhead fan stirring the scent of paper and old coffee. I spread out binders and affidavits and photos like maps before a mission. Deeds to Pelican 1 to 7. Ledgers highlighted with her "Keep Rent Stable" notes. Draft wills with my name next to steward. Notarized intent letter. Pastor's envelope, now copied and cataloged. Samuel Rohr's logbook page, dark ink freezing a moment in time. 7 cottages, 7 keys on the ring by my elbow. Every deployment had taught me the same thing. You don't go into a fight with vibes. You go in with logistics. If my parents wanted to pretend the paper didn't exist, I'd stack so much of it in front of a judge that even their best performance couldn't block the view. And when the gavel came down, it wasn't going to be on a sale contract. It was going to be on a story my grandmother started and I fully intended to finish. Andrea's office sat above a bait shop that smelled like shrimp and old ice. The stairs creaked under my boots as I climbed. Each step sounded like a countdown. 7 cottages, 6 chances left, 5 people I trusted, 4 lies told so far. The air grew cooler as I reached the landing, the hum of a window unit leaking from beneath her door. I knocked once. Come in, a voice called. The room inside smelled like paper, coffee gone a little stale, and salt sneaking in through the old window frames. Stacks of files lined the walls, neat but dense, like she'd built her own little fortress out of other people's problems. Andrea Wallace was shorter than I expected, dark hair twisted into a no-nonsense knot, glasses perched halfway down her nose. She wore a navy dress, not navy, but close enough that it made me smile, paired with flats that looked like they'd seen their share of courthouse hallways. She glanced at the binders in my arms, then at my face. You must be Emma, she said. Put those down before your spine files for disability. I set the binders on her desk with a thump. The keyring clinked at my belt, one of the teeth catching on the edge of the wood. 3 binders, 1 folder, I said. And more digital copies if you need them. Her eyebrow ticked up. Color-coded tabs? She asked. By property and year, I said. A small smile. Your grandmother would be proud, she said. I did her taxes once. She scared me, in a good way. She opened the first binder, flipped through a few pages, fingers tracing the ledger lines. Income, expenses, notes, she murmured. She tracked under-market rents on purpose. She called it her ministry, I said. You rent to people everybody else ignores? God makes sure the pipes don't burst at the worst possible moment. Sounds like her, Andrea said. She moved to the manila folder next. Draft wills, intent letter, Pastor Jim's envelope copy. Her eyes sharpened as she scanned the notarized intent. This is good, she said. Not enough by itself, but strong supporting evidence. She paused at the bottom of the page. Any formal will I sign is meant to reflect this, she read aloud. She all but wrote, "Future judge, please don't be an idiot." My mouth twitched. Then we found the logbook, I said, pulling out the copy of Samuel's entry. When she saw the notary's handwriting and the words, "Last Will and Testament," her whole posture changed. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh, that's nice." "Nice?" I asked. "From a lawyer's perspective," she said, tapping the date. "We don't have the will, but we can prove it existed and was executed, which makes its disappearance conveniently around your parents' land grab problematic for them." She sat back, lacing her fingers. "Walk me through the timeline," she said. "Dates, calls, who said what and when." I did. The funeral I missed because of deployment. The first no-will conversation over my parents' dining room table. The smell of reheated ham in the air. The bank box, the drafts, the intent letter, the church envelope, the logbook, the real estate agent on Pelican 3's porch. She jotted notes in a tight, fast hand, occasionally circling a time or underlining a phrase. When I finished, the room felt smaller, the air thicker. "If this were a movie," she said, "the missing will would be in a shoebox under their bed. In real life, it's probably in a shredder bag at the dump. But the point is, the law cares about intent and execution. We have both on paper, even without the document." She tapped the logbook copy again. "This is our pivot," she said. "Up until this line, your parents can shrug and say, 'She talked a lot, but we never saw anything.' After this line, they're on notice. A will existed. If they swear under oath that there was none, then we let the judge say, 'Interesting.'" She pulled a fresh legal pad toward her. "We're going to build a packet," she said. "You know how to do that. You just do it with pallets. I do it with paper." We spent the next hours assembling. She printed fresh copies from my scans, each one sliding hot from the machine, the smell of warm toner filling the room. Draft wills behind tab A, intent letters behind tab B, notary logbook copy under tab C, highlighted at the crucial entry. Affidavits from Sam and the church witnesses under tab D, pastor's sworn statement under tab E, tenant statements under tab F, Frank's neat block lettering spelling out what Rosalind promised, the single mom from Pelican 7 explaining how Roz refused to raise her rent while she went back to school. At tab G, Andrea insisted on including Grandma's rent ledgers. "Judges respond to patterns," she said. "Her history of keeping rents low, making notes about people's lives, it all backs up that this wasn't some last-minute whim. She lived this way." By the end, the binder had become something else entirely. Not just paper, a biography. Of the cottages, of Rosalind, of the person she believed I was. Andrea slid the stack of documents into a thick manila envelope. She wrote on the front in bold, careful letters, "To Honorable J. Hollander. From Lieutenant Emma Ward, USN. Respondent. Repeat. Estate of Rosalind A. Ward. Evidentiary packet." She held it out to me. "When you hand him this," she said, "you say as little as possible. Let the paper talk." I took it. The weight settled into my hands like a familiar toolkit. "What about my parents?" I asked. "What do they come in with?" "From what I've seen," she said, "vibes and entitlement." She shrugged. "Sometimes that works," she added, "on people who don't have a better option in front of them." She looked me up and down. Khaki t-shirt, bun still too tight from habit, keys at my belt. "That judge is going to see a Navy officer who could have stayed away but didn't," she said. "He's also going to see tenants in the back row, a pastor, a notary, and your parents trying very hard to keep everything vague." She smiled, small but sure. "I like your odds," she said. The morning of the hearing, I stood on Rosalind's old dock in my dress khakis, the bay flat as glass. The air smelled like salt and the faint tang of boat fuel from a skiff puttering past. Gulls wheeled overhead, squawking. The porch lights along Pelican Lane shut off one by one as the sun burned higher, little halos winking out. I wrapped my hand around the keyring at my hip. The edges dug into my palm, grounding. "You're late for court," I could almost hear Grandma say. "Judges don't like late. Neither does the Navy." "I'm going," I murmured. The wood under my boots creaked as I turned. At the cottage gate, Frank waited, ball cap on, collared shirt that didn't quite fit his shoulders. He smelled like coffee and shaving cream. "You ready, LT?" he asked. "Not really," I said, "but I'm going anyway." He chuckled. "That's the right answer," he said. He patted his pocket. "I've got my statement," he said. "So do Janine and the others. We'll sit in the back and try not to cuss when your father talks." "That's all I can ask," I said. At the courthouse, the air felt different. Stale, recirculated coolness, tinged with dust and the faint aroma of someone's too strong cologne. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The floor tiles were worn in patterns where years of anxious shoes had paced. In the hallway, outside the courtroom door, Mom fussed with Dad's collar, smoothing invisible wrinkles. Kyle scrolled his phone, earbuds dangling. Mom's perfume clouded the air, cloying. "You showed," Dad said when he saw me. "Figured you might come to your senses. Let this go." "Figured you might find the will," I said. "No such luck," he snorted. "Still on that," he muttered. Andrea arrived right behind me, heels crisp on the tile. She handed me a tissue. "For your parents' performance," she said under her breath. "Not tears." The bailiff opened the courtroom door. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Hollander," he called. The room smelled like lemon polish on wood benches and a hint of mildew. Ceiling fans circled lazily, even though the AC whirred. We rose. The judge took his seat. "Be seated," he said. "Let's get through this before the storm rolls in." He shuffled papers, then looked up. "Estate of Rosalind Ann Ward," he read. "We're here on a petition for administration. Petitioners say there's no will. Respondent says otherwise." His gaze landed on me. "Lieutenant Ward," he said, "do you have something for the court?" My pulse thudded in my ears, but my hands were steady as I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "This." I walked it up, the envelope's thick paper rasping against my fingers, and set it in front of him. "For the record," Andrea murmured. He eyed the label, then glanced down at my uniform. "You Navy folks and your documentation," he said. The corner of my mouth twitched. "We like things where we can find them," I said. He slit the top of the envelope with a letter opener. The room seemed to lean in. He pulled out the stack, flipped open to the first tab. Ledgers, letters, intent, affidavits. As he read, the lemon cleaner smell faded under the weight of something else. Attention. My parents watched him read, their earlier smugness thinning with every page he turned. By the time he reached tab C, I recognized the small change in his posture, shoulders shifting, jaw tightening. He stared at the notary log photocopy longer than anything else. The silence stretched. The fan ticked overhead. He looked up, eyes sharp now. "Well," he said, voice cutting through the room. "This is interesting." Minnie Hook dropped into place. He wasn't on their side. He wasn't on mine. He was on the side of whatever that stack of papers told him. And I'd spent every late night since coming home making sure it told the truth. in a language a judge understood better than any sob story. Dates, signatures, and ink that didn't lie. When the gavel came down on the word enjoined, it sounded exactly like metal hitting metal on a ship. Final. No takebacks. All sales, listings, transfers, and encumbrances on the 7 Pelican cottages, Judge Hollander said, are hereby enjoined. Frozen. Until further order. The word frozen landed like cool water on hot metal. Dad's face went slack. You can't do that, he blurted. The judge's eyebrows rose. I just did, he said. And I can do more if I find out a notarized will vanished on your watch. A quiet murmur rippled through the tenant row. Frank's hands clenched on the edge of the bench, knuckles pale. Additionally, the judge continued, shuffling my packet back into a neat stack, given the extensive documentation provided by Lieutenant Ward and the notary's log and testimony, I'm appointing her as temporary special administrator of the Pelican properties. She will collect rents, pay necessary expenses, and maintain the cottages in line with the decedent's practice. My breath caught. Special administrator. In plain English, he was handing me the wheel. For the record, he added, this is not a final ruling on the ultimate distribution of the estate. But someone has to keep the roofs from caving in while we sort out your interesting missing will. His gaze pinned my parents to their chairs. We'll also be sending the matter of that missing will to the appropriate authorities for review, he said. If this was an honest mistake, you'll have the chance to show it. If it wasn't, he let the suggestion hang. Dad's jaw flexed. We're not criminals, he said again, weaker this time. Then you should have nothing to fear from the truth, the judge replied. Court is adjourned for today. Counsel, see my clerk about mediation. He banged the gavel once. The courtroom exhaled. Andrea touched my elbow. Don't grin, she whispered. Not yet. We're not done. I hadn't realized my mouth had started to lift. In the benches behind, tenants started to stand. Frank caught my eye and mimed a salute, 2 fingers to the brim of his hat. Not full Navy precise, but close. Janine wiped at her eyes. Pastor Jim bowed his head briefly, lips moving in a thank you I didn't need to hear. My parents were slower to get up. Mom stared at the tabletop, fingers worrying the edge of a tissue into shredded strings. Dad sat rigid, color high in his cheeks, eyes flicking between me, the judge's bench, and my packet, as if he could will it all back into my hands. Kyle just looked lost. His sunglasses hung from his collar now. Without them, he looked younger, like the kid who used to help me haul paint cans, but never stuck around long enough to use a brush. As I turned to leave, Dad stepped into my path in the aisle. We could have handled this as a family, he snapped, keeping his voice low enough to avoid the mic, but not subtle. You lit that bridge on fire when you said there was no will, I said. Family doesn't start a grab the second the dirt settles. Mom flinched. We were scared, she said. You don't understand what it's like. Bills piling up, retirement gone sideways. Your brother... Don't make this about me, Kyle muttered behind them, guilt threading his tone. Andrea cleared her throat, stepping closer. This is a hallway, not mediation, she reminded them. You'll have a chance to talk terms with a neutral present. Terms, Dad repeated, like it tasted bad. She's our daughter, not our landlord. She's your mother's chosen steward, Andrea said calmly. The paperwork says so. His stare flicked to me. What, you going to evict us from your life if we don't bow and scrape? He said. Use a judge like a hammer? I thought of the keys digging into my palm, the ledgers with Grandma's tiny notes, the notary's logbook.
I'm not swinging a hammer, I said quietly. I'm holding a line she drew before she died. You're the ones who tried to erase it. We held each other's gaze. It wasn't the same as standing nose to nose on a pitching deck with a stubborn chief. This was messier, older. The air between us smelled like his aftershave and the faint scent of court dust, not diesel and salt. But the dynamic was oddly familiar. Someone convinced they knew better than the person who'd done the actual work. As your father, he started. I cut him off. As her special administrator, I said, I have an obligation to the court and to Grandma. As your daughter, I'm telling you plainly, keep pushing like this, you'll lose more than a few cottages. He blinked. Mom grabbed his arm. Mark, she whispered, not here.
Not now. Kyle stepped around them, closer to me. That thing the judge said, he murmured, voice low, eyes on the floor. About interesting? He wasn't on their side.
No, I said. He was on the side of the paper. Kyle swallowed.
How did you find all that?
He asked. The bank box, the notary, the pastor. I didn't even know she had a safe deposit box. She trusted me with directions, I said, because I always checked the locks. He opened his mouth, closed it.
I thought you were just off doing Navy cosplay,
he admitted.
Didn't realize you've been training your whole life to fight like this.
It's not cosplay when people drown if you miscount, I said. The bailiff cleared his throat gently.
Ma'am, folks need the aisle,
he said. Right, I said. We're going. In the hallway, the air felt looser. Andrea steered me to a bench near the window. Outside, the sky had darkened, storm clouds stacking up over the palms. The glass was warm under my hand. You did well, she said. I mostly stood there, I replied. You showed up with a coherent story and backed it with underlined receipts, she said. That's more than most clients manage. She flipped open her notebook. Next step is mediation, she said. We'll get a date. We'll go in with the same approach. Facts first, feelings second. You already know what you want. Control, preservation, a structured way to keep them fed without giving them matches again. I stared out at the swaying trees. I don't want to grind them into dust, I said. Just stop them from draining what she built. That's the difference, she said. You want stewardship, not revenge. Judges notice that. A low rumble of thunder rolled in the distance, vibration faint through the glass. Down the hall, my parents and their attorney huddled by the water fountain. Mom's hands moved as she talked, anxious flutters. Dad's shoulders were tight. Their lawyer's expression said he was calculating odds, not feelings. Frank ambled up,
hat in his hands. You all right, LT? He asked. For now, I said. He nodded toward the courtroom. Never thought I'd see the day a judge quoted a notary log like it was scripture, he said. Your grandma would have loved that. I smiled despite the knot in my chest. She always said the good book and good bookshelves went together, I said. He chuckled. A tenant couple from Pelican 5 approached. We heard what they said about raising rents and selling, the wife said, worry still etched around her eyes. The judge, he really froze that? They can't just kick us out now? Not without going through him, I said. And I'll be standing between you and any bad ideas. Her shoulders dropped, just a little. Thank you, she said. I know you have a whole navy to worry about. You didn't have to do this. I looked at the ring of keys on my belt. Yes, I said. I did. Later, back at the cottages, the storm finally broke.
Rain hammered the metal roofs, a steady drumming that shook loose old dust. The air smelled like wet asphalt, salt, and the sharp green of soaked palms. I stood on Pelican 4's porch, watching sheets of water blur the lane. Porch lights flicked on automatically, halos in the downpour. Under the eaves, barely getting damp, the tenants gathered like they always did when weather hit. Frank with his mug, the kids from Pelican 6 squealing at each lightning flash, the older couple from Pelican 1 arguing gently about whether they'd need sandbags. For a moment, it felt like time hadn't moved. Then my phone buzzed, a message from Mom. "We didn't expect it to go like that. I'm scared, Emma. Not of you, of everything. Mediation? We'll show up. Just don't ruin us." I stared at the screen. In the reflection, I could see my own face, the porch light above me, the rain streaking down the glass. Somewhere in the house behind me, Grandma's Pelican mug sat by the sink, a faint ring of coffee still stubborn in the bottom. I typed back. "I'm not trying to ruin you."
I'm trying to stop you from ruining what she left all of us. Show up honest in mediation. We'll figure the rest out. 3 dots flashed, disappeared. No reply. The rain eased. Lightning moved farther offshore, thunder now a low growl instead of a crack. I wrapped my fingers around the keys at my hip and felt something settle. The court had given me a foothold. The next fight wouldn't be about whether I belonged in this story. It would be about what shape that story took, how much of their mess I was willing to fold into my duty without letting it sink the cottages. It was one thing to halt a sale with the judge's interesting. It was another to sit across from my own parents in a beige room and say, calmly, "Here are the terms. You can stay in my life. You cannot keep rewriting grandmas." The mediation room was beige in every possible way. Beige carpet, beige walls, beige blinds half drawn against Florida sun. The only color came from a drooping plant in the corner and the blue ink of the mediator's pen as it scratched across a yellow legal pad. The air smelled like burnt coffee from the hallway machine and that faint, stale chill of overused air conditioning. I sat on one side of the table with Andrea, my evidence binder open in front of us like a command console. The ring of 7 keys lay beside it, metal cool under my fingers whenever I needed grounding. Across from us, my parents and Kyle shared the opposite side. Mom clutched a tissue she hadn't actually used yet, twisting it as if pre-soaking future tears. Dad stared at a spot on the wall just over my shoulder, jaw clenched, lines deeper around his mouth. Kyle's hands were jammed into the front pocket of his hoodie, his leg bouncing under the table. The mediator, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a voice like chamomile tea, smiled tightly. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "My role is to facilitate a conversation that leads to an agreement you can all live with." We're not here to relitigate the will question. That's in the judge's hands. We're here to talk about what happens next with the 7 Pelican cottages and your family. She looked at my parents first. "Mr. and Mrs. Ward," she said, "in simple terms, what do you want?" Dad ran a hand over his face. "We want what's fair," he said. "We're her children. Those houses are our inheritance. We need income. We can't just be cut out because Emma found some old drafts and a notary's doodle." Andrea's pen twitched at doodle. The mediator nodded, jotting. "Financial security in retirement," she said. "A sense of being recognized as her children." "Okay." She turned to me. "Emma?" "I want what Grandma wanted," I said. She didn't see the cottages as a prize. She saw them as a responsibility. She made her intent clear in every document, note, and ledger. They're meant to stay affordable, intact, and under someone's care who treats them like more than inventory. I rested my hand on the binder. I also want my parents to not end up homeless, I added. I'm not here to salt the earth, but I won't let them treat these homes like lottery winnings. Mom's eyes filled for the first time all day. The mediator nodded slowly. So the goals are preserve the cottages and their mission, address your parents' financial anxiety, and find a way for you all to coexist without burning down every bridge, she summarized. Let's talk specifics. She looked at my parents again. How bad is it? She asked gently. Your finances. Dad blinked. That's private, he said instinctively. Private is what got you here, I said, not unkindly. He shot me a look. We're stretched, Mom said quietly, before he could speak. We took early retirement assuming the market would keep climbing. Then it dipped. Then there was Kyle. Kyle stiffened. Say it, he muttered. Gambling, she whispered. Debts. We helped, twice. Credit cards, second mortgage. It snowballed. The mediator's pen moved. And the cottages look like a way out, she concluded. One big solution instead of 1,000 small humiliations. Dad exhaled sharply. We thought Roz would leave them to us anyway, he said. We told ourselves we were just accelerating what was already ours. My fist tightened around the keys until the metal bit my palm. You told the court there was no will, I said. That's not acceleration. That's erasure. He flinched. The mediator held up a hand. Let's stay with the what now, she said. Lieutenant Ward, you're temporary special administrator. What would your ideal long-term structure look like? I opened the binder to a tab marked Projection. I'd built the spreadsheet late one night with the same grim focus I used on stock tallies before deployment. Income, expenses, contingencies. The cottages cover their own costs, I said. Barely, but they do. If we avoid big, unnecessary upgrades and keep them maintained, they generate modest net income after taxes and repairs. I slid copies of the projection across to everyone. Here's what I'm proposing, I said. We create a Pelican Cottages Trust. All 7 properties go into it. I serve as trustee and manager. The trust charter locks in no sales without court approval and ties rents to local median incomes. Tenants still get stability. Grandma's mission is preserved. Dad scanned the page, features tightening at the word trustee. And us? He asked. You receive a fixed monthly stipend from net rental income, I said. Not enough to live like royalty. Enough to cover basics you're drowning under. Mortgage, utilities, essential medical. The trust also pays a baseline health insurance premium for you two, as long as you don't try to undermine or sell assets out from under it. Mom's eyes widened. You'd do that? She whispered. After everything? I'm not interested in revenge, I said. I'm interested in making sure you aren't so desperate you try to repeat this in 5 years with something else. The mediator scribbled. And your brother? She asked. I turned to Kyle. If you want any help from the trust, I said, you enroll in a real recovery program. Not just a week of detox and a new set of lies. You go through the ugly, boring parts too. You meet milestones. You send documentation. No access to money. No loans. If the counselors say part of your recovery can include supervised work, I'll put a paint scraper in your hand when you're ready and let you sweat on Pelican 3. He let out a strangled laugh. Sounds like hell, he said. Recovery usually does, I said. He went quiet, eyes on the table. The mediator looked between us. Mr. and Mrs. Ward, she said. What about this feels impossible? What scares you? Dad stared at the projection.
It makes her the boss, he said finally. Of everything. Of us. Of the cottages, I corrected. Not your lives. You can still tell each other what to eat for dinner. For decades, he said, voice low. I was the one who knew where the money was. I made the calls. And now I'm sitting here listening to my own daughter tell me what my allowance will be. His pride lay between us on the table like another person. I get that, I said. I do. But your decisions, secrecy, denial, pretending the will never existed, put us here. I'm the only one in this room who has demonstrated a track record of managing things for someone other than myself. Mom winced, but didn't argue. The mediator nodded. Mark, she said gently. The judge has already seen enough to put Emma in charge temporarily. If you fight this structure, he's likely to give her more power, not less. At least this way, you have a guaranteed stipend and a say in a framework that doesn't end with bankruptcy or criminal charges. He rubbed his temples. Criminal, he muttered. We're not good people do stupid, selfish, sometimes illegal things when they're desperate, Andrea said calmly. Owning that now is better than letting a prosecutor frame it for you later. Silence. I watched my father's face. Anger, shame, fear, all warring behind his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice sounded older. What if we say yes? He asked. And then you walk away. Navy picks you up again. You go deployed. Who runs all this then? Another stranger? It was a fair question. I'd anticipated it. The trust charter will name a secondary trustee, I said. Andrea's firm or another neutral. Someone with a fiduciary duty and no blood stake. But I'm not going anywhere for a while. My next orders keep me within driving distance. I structured it that way on purpose. He blinked. You did? Mom asked. Ships ask, I said. People negotiate. The mediator leaned forward slightly. Can you live with that? She asked them. Your daughter as trustee, a neutral backup, a defined monthly amount, the cottages preserved, your mother's legacy honored? Mom nodded slowly, tears finally spilling. I could, she said. If Emma is really okay with that. With us. She looked at me, eyes shining. I am not okay with what you did, I said bluntly, lying about the will, burning her letters, meeting that agent on the porch. But I am okay with not letting that be the last chapter. Dad's shoulders slumped. Do we have to say anything? He asked, voice ragged. About what we did with the will? We don't know exactly what you did, Andrea said coolly. We just know when the paper trail ends. But yes, this agreement will reference the lost will doctrine and the judge's finding that a signed will existed. He's already referred the disappearance for review. He closed his eyes for a moment. I didn't burn it, he said quietly. If that's what you think. I didn't, personally, I just didn't look as hard as I could have when it was convenient not to find it. That was, in its own warped way, a confession. I believe you, I said, about the fire, not about the effort. The mediator slid a draft agreement toward us. Let's put this in writing, she said. Trust structure, stipend formula, rent protections, recovery conditions, secondary trustee. You'll all sign. The court will bless it. And the next time you're tempted to treat those cottages like scratch-offs, you'll have a legal reminder that they're not. We spent the next hour hammering out specifics. The stipend amount, review clauses, reporting requirements, language that enshrined affordable housing and
tenant stability into the trust's bones. At one point, Kyle looked up from the paper he'd been staring at like it was a foreign language. "Do you really think I can rehab and scrape paint?" he asked me. "After everything?" "I think if you don't try, you'll be right back where you were," I said. "And Grandma will haunt every blackjack table you sit at." He snorted. "That sounds like her," he said. When it was all typed, printed, and slid across the table, the mediator uncapped a blue pen. "Sign here," she said. "All of you. This becomes your new map." I signed first. Emma Rosalind Ward. The middle name felt like a hand on my shoulder. Mom signed next, hand trembling. Dad hesitated, then pressed the pen down, his signature less bold than I'd ever seen it. Kyle last. When it was done, the mediator gathered the papers like precious cargo. "I'll submit this to Judge Hollander," she said. "Once he signs off, it's enforceable. You've moved from open war to a ceasefire with structure." She smiled faintly. "That's no small thing," she added. Outside, the sun hit us full in the face. The air smelled like hot asphalt and distant salt, heavy but alive. We stood in the courthouse parking lot, uncertain, a loose triangle of people who shared DNA and nearly broke each other over 7 small houses. "So you're our trustee now," Kyle said after a moment. "Does that make you like captain of the cottages?" "Don't call me that," I said. "I'll never hear the end of it on base." He grinned, the first genuine one I'd seen on him in months. "Commander of the cottages?" he offered. "Absolutely not," I said. Dad shoved his hands in his pockets. "You really going to send us money every month?" he asked, "without holding it over our heads?" "I'm going to send the trust money every month," I said. "The trust will send you what we agreed. If you keep your side of the deal, we won't have a problem." Mom wiped her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not choosing the harshest path." I thought of the binders, the logbook, the tenants' faces, the judge's half laugh. "I chose the path she'd recognize," I said. "Hard, but not cruel." We walked to our cars. At my door, Dad called my name. I turned. He stood there, looking smaller than he had in the courtroom, the Keys' son drawing every line on his face. "I still don't understand the Navy," he said. "I still don't like that it takes you away." He paused. "But I can see now that whatever it taught you, we needed it, even if we didn't want to." It wasn't an apology. It was the closest thing I was going to get that day. "Next time you want to understand it," I said, "you can come to the pier instead of a realtor's office." He nodded once. "I'll think about it," he said. It was more than I'd had that morning. As I drove back toward Bay Pelican Lane, the keys at my belt jingled softly with every bump. 7 little houses waited at the end of the road, porch lights ready to flick on at dusk. For the first time since Grandma's heart stopped, I could picture a future where they stayed what they were meant to be. Not assets to liquidate, not trophies, homes. And I would be the one making sure the paperwork matched the promise. Sunrise on the bay never looked exactly the same twice. That morning, it bled in slow, soft streaks, pale peach melting into gold, then into deeper blue as the sky shrugged off night. The water below the dock caught it all, ripples turning color into broken glass. I stood barefoot on the boards behind Pelican 4, coffee warm in my hand, the wood cool under my soles. The air smelled like salt and damp rope, and the faint sweetness of someone baking muffins in Pelican 3. Grandma's chipped Pelican mug fit my grip like always. The little crack in the glaze caught the light, same as it had when I was 12 and certain the world ended at the edge of these cottages. Now I knew better. The world was wider, but this strip of land still anchored me. 3 months had passed since Judge Hollander signed off on the trust. The document hung framed in Rosalind's old living room now, the language dense but clear. Pelican Cottages Trust, Trustee, Lieutenant Emma Ward, USN. Stipends, rent caps, no sales without court approval. Affordable housing carved into Florida legal code as firmly as any deed restriction. The cottages wore their new lines well. Pelican 1's porch had fresh boards. Pelican 2's shutters held their blue. Pelican 3, the one I'd threatened Kyle with, gleamed in solid mint, its once sagging rail straight and sturdy, thanks to more than one long afternoon of his sweat and muttered complaints. He'd checked into rehab 2 weeks after mediation. At first, his texts read like a hostage sending proof of life, short, stiff updates. Group today. Didn't leave. Told my story without lying, I think. We had to list one thing you'd do differently if you got a second chance. I said, read the fine print before signing my life away at a blackjack table. The counselor said, and maybe listen to your sister. Don't let that go to your head. When he finished his first 90 days, he'd shown up at Pelican 3 in paint-splattered jeans, arms thinner but eyes clearer. So, he'd said, holding up a bucket and a brush, where do you want the redemption arc to start? The house still smelled like primer and fresh lumber from that day. My parents took longer. The first trust stipend hit their account the month after court, enough to stop the worst of the bleeding. Mom called me that night. Her voice sounded different, less brittle, more tired. We paid the mortgage current, she said, and your father's prescriptions. We didn't put any of it on cards. Good, I said. We went back to the group at church, she added, for parents of service members. We listened more, talked less. I could almost hear Grandma's approving snort. Dad didn't call, but he sent emails, short ones at first, questions about maintenance schedules, insurance renewals, things he could have dug through the binders to find but chose to ask instead. I answered, kept it factual, drew boundaries and brackets. When I walked them through the trust's first formal report at Grandma's dining table, income, expenses, stipends, they both listened without interrupting. Dad even asked about the tenants. How's the single mom in Pelican 7? He said, surprising himself as much as me. The one Mom always talked about. She finished her nursing program, I said. Got a job at the clinic. Still here. Pays on time. Brought us brownies at Christmas. Mom smiled, eyes shining. Roz would like that, she said. They still hadn't said the words "we took advantage," or "we tried to erase her will." But they'd stopped pretending it had been a misunderstanding. For now, that was enough. On base, life moved on. Watches, drills, inventories. The ship's hum under my boots, the steady routine of checking boxes that represented actual lives. In my small office, directly above my desk, the shadow box hung where I could see it whenever I looked up from a screen. Inside, a copy of Samuel Rohr's logbook line, shrunk to fit but still legible. A photocopy of Grandma's Emma, just in case, envelope. A miniature of the courtroom order appointing me special administrator, folded to show my name. Haynes's old coin from that long-ago deployment, she went back, mounted dead center. One brass cottage key, original paint flaking, labeled Pelican 4. Next to it, my Navy medals gleamed in their own frame. On the shelf below, my promotion certificate sat tucked beside a photograph of the day on the courthouse steps, me in khakis, binder under my arm, Frank and a cluster of tenants behind me, eyes fierce and proud. Every time I walked out of that office,
I carried both worlds on my shoulders. The one measured in tons and nautical miles. The one measured in porch lights and rent checks. I didn't mind the weight. It felt earned. Back on the dock, the sunrise finished its climb. The cottages woke up slowly. A door creaked open at Pelican 2. Frank stepped out in his usual shorts and t-shirt, mug in hand. He raised it in my direction. "Mornin', LT," he called. "Mornin', Frank," I said. "You see the paper?" he asked. "County Council tried to push through a zoning change 3 streets over. Tenants would have been screwed. People fought it." "Good," I said. "Only reason they're paying attention," he added, "is because folks like you walked into that courthouse and reminded them working people live here." He said it casually, but the words stuck. Pelican 5's screen door squeaked. A kid barreled out with a backpack, the smell of toast drifting behind him as his mom yelled something about lunch. Pelican 7's porch light finally flicked off, late, like it had slept in. On the small side table beside my chair, my phone buzzed. A new email from Judge Hollander's clerk. Subject: Pelican Cottages Trust. Annual review waived. Judge Hollander reviewed your first-year report. No hearing required at this time. His note: this is how it should work. I smiled. The judge might never say it out loud in open court, but that 2-sentence email was its own kind of salute. A few minutes later,
Another message slid in. From Dad. No subject line, no dramatic preamble, just drove past the cottages today, didn't stop. For the first time, I saw what Mom saw on them. Not dollar signs. You were right to fight us. I'm glad you did. Your grandmother would have been proud. If you want us to help repaint Pelican 1 this spring, we'll come. Under your supervision, of course. I read it twice. Mug paused halfway to my lips. Then I forwarded it to myself, to a folder I'd started without meaning to. Family, when they try. I replied, I'll let you know when we schedule painting. Bring work clothes. And an apology for the tenants. Emma. 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Nothing else came. I set the phone down. The breeze shifted, cooler now, carrying a hint of open water. Somewhere beyond my line of sight, ships moved, unseen but very much there. I looked at the 7 pastel cottages lined up facing the bay, edges scraped, paint fresh, porch lights off, rents current. On any given day, I was still the Navy lieutenant making sure transmissions didn't get lost and supplies didn't vanish into the ether. But here, each key on my ring was its own quiet commission. Grandma hadn't lived to see me walk into that courtroom. She hadn't heard the judge say, "Well, this is interesting," as he realized what my parents had tried to do. She hadn't watched my parents sign away their power to flip her life's work into cash. But she'd trusted me enough to leave directions in triplicate: bank, church, notary, keys, binders, letters. The Navy taught me how to move pallets and numbers. She taught me why it mattered where they landed. I took one last sip from the Pelican mug, then set it down on the dock rail. The wood was warm under my palm as I reached for the keys at my hip. 7 bits of metal. 7 front doors. 7 lines in a long ledger that outlived a single will. My grandmother's legacy wasn't the paint or the property. It was the choice to do the honest, harder thing, even when family wanted the easy, crooked one. I'd inherited the keys and the paperwork. The honor? That part I had to prove. Every page, every signature, every sunrise. Honor isn't inherited. It's proven page by page. If your family ever tried to rewrite your story or steal what you earned, follow channel for more stories of women in uniform choosing truth over silence.